Evening, Cherries fans, and welcome to this special interview here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Now, before I welcome on my special guest, here's a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. To find out what they can do for you, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. Now, my special guest today is a former Cherries chairman. As a lifelong supporter of the club, he actually was the owner from 2009 all the way to 2013. We're going to find out in his own words, his story. It is a pleasure to welcome onto Up the Cherries in all departments, Eddie Mitchell. Evening, Eddie. How are you?
Evening. Yeah, fine, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us on this special show. So, of course, you are a local lad and you grew up supporting the football club. What were your earliest memories of AFC Bournemouth?
Well, I was born in Boscombe Hospital, which was, very near the ground. Raised in Boscombe for a couple of years and then moved to Parkstone. And I suppose from the age of about 6 or 7, started playing football quite a lot in the local parks, and got into football, and probably noticed Bournemouth as a local club to us, and the one that I was obviously going to support from about that age, really. I remember back in those days, there used to be a pink paper that used to come out every Saturday after the results had come out, and all the scores were in it. And I suppose my first port of call was to look and see how Bournemouth got on. I was a Wolves supporter at the time as well, so it'd be Bournemouth, then Wolves, and yeah.
How did supporting Wolves come about?
Don't know. They played in the '69 FA Cup against Forest, I think, and I think maybe that was one of the first televised games I managed to watch. Sorry, not '69, '59, and I think that was one of the first games I got to watch. Yeah.
From an early age, which players stood out for you? What was your favourite player for Bournemouth at the time?
Well, going back, I suppose I looked at the club and would recognise names from about when, like, Ted McDougall was about. I didn't really get into the playing side, interested in the players themselves until such time as about then when it became popular. But I think from memory, I went to the club and watched it from, I think, where the West Stand is now was the supporters' end when I was probably 12. So that would have been, 66, something like that. But I don't know, I can't really remember the players. I think Ted McDougall was the first one, and Phil Bowyer, and that's the time when I was really interested in the players. And then I suppose manager-wise, it was when Harry came along and made a name for himself, and that's when I really sort of followed the individuals at the club. It was before that, it was just reading about it on the back page of the Echo or looking at the results each week and going to the odd game when I could afford it.
And of course, you've got involved into the club during some of our more troubled times. There was multiple winding up petitions. What were the first things that you had to tackle?
First thing I had to tackle was cleaning the road sign from yellow, from black to yellow, where it had Bournemouth Football Club and an arrow pointing to it. That was my very first job. And I did that the first Sunday morning I got the keys. And after that, it was just natural. Things just came up and I ploughed through them. I didn't
And
have a plan. I didn't have a great deal of finance. I had a lot of assets, but not cash. So it was not easy to just pay things. So we had to be inventive, strict. And I was turning over probably 25, 30 million pounds a year when I actually bought the club. And so that was a lot of contractors that worked for me. And had done for many years. And I obviously have started a lot of businesses, where one-man bands, so to speak, came to work for me and then employed more people to keep up with me. So I think probably they contributed between them getting on for £250,000 and got nothing for it, really. I just kept my work and they were pleased to be associated with it and they helped tremendously with that. But we just, every time something came up, I found a way to get past it, which I've done in my life.
When you did take over the club, of course, you like we mentioned, you're a fan. I'm sure that had an added impetus, but the ground and the surrounding area was a bit of a mess at the time, wasn't it? So, what else did you do in those early days?
Well, I think first of all, the club's very spiritual. I can't say the word, but it's spiritual. You
Yeah,
might be able to say it.
spiritual.
Yeah, you sort of get. For some reason, I knew I was going to be involved in that club from a very early age in my life. I don't know why, but I just inside me, I knew it, and I had the chance the previous year. But I had several phone calls from various people and it just didn't seem right. And I was in my third year at Dorchester Town doing my apprenticeship as a chairman. And but I just knew the time would come. And the following year, when I did get involved, it was just it was obvious to me that it was a club which had been. I'm not allowed to swear on this, I suppose. So it'd been had
Go
over.
for it. Go for
No,
it, Eddie.
it'd been had over by
Yeah.
a lot of people at the top, and and that includes one or two that's still there now. It was a bit farcical, really. They just were jockeying for positions to be able to sort of have bragging rights all the time, and it was pretty obvious to me that I had to act on my own, pretty much, not as a board. Although we used to have board meetings regular, I just ended up doing what I wanted to do because I had the majority share, or I had the option to buy a majority share. And the rest of the board knew that, and I just got on with the way I've always done things on my own. It was a mess. There was a lot of obligations to the local authority that hadn't been fulfilled. The East Stand was pretty derelict, except for one part. Obviously, there was no fourth stand, which I was determined to leave a mark and get the fourth stand. And yeah, it was a mess. So I'd spent my working life from the age of about 20 creating environments for people to move into by building houses and making them nicer than the builders next door. So they bought mine. And it came as natural to me, really, to start tidying the place up. And as we got the money in, I spent it on the ground because I felt that it would be easier to attract players somewhere that's quite special, easy to attract investment and easy to attract supporters. So I went about my business, got my head down.
One thing that both myself and Matt, who co-hosts this channel as well, have been discussing is that you didn't really get much credit for putting the club on a good financial footing. And how difficult was it to turn around a club that had been in so much turmoil? So we've had the Winter Gardens, of course we had -17. How difficult was it to turn that club into something that was on a good financial footing?
How difficult? Well, I think it was really easy. I wouldn't change a day of there was a worry at the time, but it's an enjoyable worry. It's a challenge, I suppose, rather
Mhm.
than a worry. And I like challenges. I haven't had credit for what I've done, but I don't really want it. Um, I've been written out the club's history by the hierarchy there now. Um, and I think it's pretty poison to mention my name at the club. I totally banned from the club, and I've been from 2 months after I sold my shares, um, for reasons unbeknown to me, really. And I think probably because I speak my mind and get on with things, that I think the people there now running the club were a little bit apprehensive of having me around.
But would you agree that your work really did start the success that we're enjoying to this day in the Premier League?
I think it did, but I didn't do it alone. I worked alone, but there
Mhm,
was an awful lot of support from the supporters,
mhm.
from friends that I had at the club, friends that I made at the club, um, and I think the club's supporters and other people that are involved with the club are really good and pulled their weight as well. So I just pulled my weight and led the way, and I'm not really one for complying with everything. I just usually see right from wrong and go down the right road if I can, and
Mhm.
um, bulldoze my way through. And that's really what I intended to do from day one, and what I did in the 4 years I was there.
Of course, one man that you did appoint was a certain Eddie Howe. And let's be fair, he managed to perform a miracle for us, surviving that -17 season and retaining our place in the Football League. How was it? And double question really here. How was it like working with Eddie and Jason? And could you tell at that point how good they were going to be?
I could tell from day one, really, after the first meeting I had with Eddie at the stadium, that I didn't really have to worry much about the playing side. We had a bit of a Barney in one of the boxes there, and I could see that he was pretty much of my own making, very determined, very single minded, and I found him a pleasure to work with, um, because it took all the pressure off of me. We were embargoed, so we couldn't really buy or sell players unless we cleared the embargo, which we couldn't at the time. So the camaraderie with the players that was there was born, and it really got us that first year's promotion. But the only thing I could say about Eddie is that I like to lead from the front. And I think I've said this before, but he used to piss me off because he was the only one that would ever get there before me sometimes. And I like getting to work first before anybody else. So that's the only thing he really pissed me off doing.
Is it true he used to turn up at 6 a.m. in the morning, first one in, last one out?
I'm not so sure about the last one out because I was not always the last one out, and I don't really recall that. But I know for a fact that I used to get there very early in the morning, and probably 30% of the time he would get there first before me, and it got to a point where I started getting earlier and earlier, so that I was first there. I don't know why it bugged me so much, but that was the way it was. I don't know whether he felt the same, or he just enjoys starting early. But yeah, it was pretty obvious that he was going places, and I think Jason compliments Eddie in a way. And yeah, and I made a prediction then, and I still make that prediction now, that he'll be the England manager that wins the next World Cup.
And do you know what? Even said to Harry Redknapp recently, and I said about Eddie being the next England manager, and I believe it will happen. I believe Eddie Howe will get his chance as England manager, because of the great work he's done, and he's still doing it at Newcastle.
Yeah,
Now, putting it on the other foot, if we hadn't have survived that season, so if we had gone down out of the Football League, would this club have survived?
yeah, yeah. It would have survived. Yeah, if I was still there, I mean,
Mhm,
and Eddie was there in that season, and it went down, it would have survived. Yeah, because we'd have come back up. But
mhm,
um, it was obvious to me that we weren't going to go down because
mhm,
of the way that the players knitted together, and we changed things for them. We went from the wheelie bin ice bath to a proper ice bath.
mhm,
You know, got rid of the mold in the showers and put new showers in, and we just made it more of a nicer environment for them.
mhm,
And yeah, they enjoyed it, and I think that was probably my best year at the club.
mhm. It was always the thing, that we used to hear, and it's even in documentaries that if the club had dropped out of the Football League, the club would have folded. But it's good to know that that wasn't the case.
No, not if. Well, it might have been if I. I'm not saying I was the only one, but if it had somebody with the determination that I had, it's got plenty of support to keep it going. I mean, it was difficult because of the stadium had been sold,
Mhm,
um, and really all the assets in the club had been stripped out. There was one small piece of land which was still owned by the club, um, which nevertheless, the person who owned it had a first charge on it. So, it was the ex, no, sorry, the now chairman. So, yeah, it would have survived.
yeah, no, that's good because I guess it was all media talk, wasn't it, at the time?
Yeah, well, the media liked, especially the Echo, liked to see Bournemouth in distress at the time. They're a bit frightened too now,
Mhm.
but because it's grown so much with the Premiership status. But yeah, they did like to rubbish the club, especially when I was there.
What was your relationship like with Eddie Howe? And was it a case that you could speak to him, and did he demand players, or was he respectful that this is what the club can do at this moment in time, and
Well, I never said no to him once in the relationship that we had. I feel that we gave him the best we could. The relationship with him was um, on and off, usually through my fault. I tended to show my emotions too much, and a couple of times visited the changing rooms and give my opinion. And I Eddie jacked him once, and Jason, after I'd done that at Notts County, and we were 3-0 down at half time, and I had a stinking headache. Um, so we fell out, but I sort of dodged the bullets for a couple of weeks. I didn't accept his resignation, and we made it up and got on. So by and large, it was a really good relationship. But I used to sort of upset the apple cart a bit by getting over enthusiastic, thinking I could do something when I couldn't.
No, fair enough. Of course, Brett Pittman was on fire for us. He was fantastic, scoring lots of goals. He did eventually leave the club to go to Bristol City, and he was in great form before that. Was that a necessity at the time, or because of the financial issues, or was that a move that Brett did want?
Well, Brett's always been my favourite player that was at the club. Although I thought all the boys that were there in the promotion from Division 2 were all really great lads, but Brett's always been my favourite because of his goal scoring ability and his swagger. But we didn't need to sell him, but it was very handy to sell him. It was very handy for me because I could use that money to continue improving the ground that we got for him. And not only that, he was capable of going a bit further. And we felt that it was a better move, good move for him at the time. So I didn't want to stand in his way.
Of course, there was that situation as well where Southampton tried to get hold of Eddie Howe, and
Yeah.
what was the truth in that, and how did that all pan out?
Well, Kataisi's secretary put me through to Kataisi. If you can remember the guy, he was at Southampton at the time, the chairman, I
Yeah.
think, or something or other. And he called me up and he asked if he could speak to Eddie. And I gave it some thought and got back to him and said, yeah, you can. I felt Eddie deserved the chance to move forward if he could, and it was a bigger club, and so I didn't stand his way. Eddie went to see him, as far as I'm aware. He told me he did, and he told me that he was offered the job. So I thought, great. But Eddie turned it down. He told me he wasn't interested in it. So it was good for me to make that news. So I got it out there, and then I had a phone call from, I didn't, I had a phone call from Kataisi's secretary just to say that we were travelling to, we were playing Southampton and I wouldn't be welcome in the boardroom. So I'd have to make other arrangements if I wanted to watch the game there. So I made other arrangements and booked a box, not knowing where the box was going to be. And when we got there, we went in the box, and I didn't know where it was going to be, but it was right in the middle of the Southampton supporters end. And somebody had recognised me and the people I were with and started jeering and what have you before the game. And so I reminded them that we were higher than them in the league, and they took an offence to it and tried to get over the barriers and invade our box. So the security came and kept them away for the first half, and then moved us to a box up the other end in the second half. I took the initiative to go and say hello to Kataisi in the boardroom at half time, and tapped on the door and asked if I could see him, and he came to the door, and we shook hands, and he was fine. But that's the story about that, really.
Of course, Eddie did eventually leave to go to Burnley shortly after. Did you try and keep Eddie at the club, and what made him go to Burnley in particular?
Well, it's another move. It was a move forward to the Championship. Of course, I tried to keep him at the club. We didn't want to lose him, but at the time, I wasn't really in a position to hold people back. I wasn't that experienced in, managing football, although I'd done 4 years at Dorchester. But, I just felt if anybody was able to better themselves, then I wouldn't stand in their way and I'd let them move on. And obviously we would have reaped the reward anyway and try to invest that wisely. So we ended up getting quite a bit of money for him and the guys that followed him. So it was convenient at the time and helped the club in that way. I wished him well. We kept in touch. And at that time, I regarded him as a friend and, often text him, wishing him well before the game and and so on, like you do with people you know.
And of course, you had to search for a new manager, but you promoted within again, and appointed Lee Bradbury. And under Lee Bradbury, we narrowly missed out reaching the playoff final. We got beat by Huddersfield
Yeah.
in the semis. What was your reasoning behind appointing him and Fletch as number two? Did you see something in them that you thought, right, okay, this is the natural transition from Eddie?
Well, just going to the Huddersfield game. It's one of the best games I've ever been to. I watched it from behind the goal,
Yep.
um, and it was fantastic. And the only thing I didn't go along with it is Lee Bradbury told me after that the referee said that if there was to be penalties, there wouldn't be a toss a coin because he had been advised by the Huddersfield security people or whatever that it was not correct to take it at where the Bournemouth supporters were behind the goal because it was not deemed safe. So they'd have to be taken down the Huddersfield end, which is what happened. Um,
Mm.
that's another story, but I personally, I wouldn't have gone along with it. I would have made sure there
I
was a
agree.
coin. But Lee was he was a good gentleman, and he adhered to it. But I, in my 40 odd years of employing people, probably nearer 50 now, um, I've always tried to promote within. You know what you're getting, and you try to
Yep.
help people along their careers. I did speak to Eddie about the decision to consider Bradbury and Fletcher. I mean, Lee, because he was nearing the end of his career, and I noticed that he'd had a bit of a military background, so I thought he would have been quite strict. And so I thought, and his knowledge, and he'd played for Man City, and he was quite a good player, and I thought he would make a good manager. And Fletch, I thought, well, the crowd love him, so appointing him as a player assistant, I couldn't go wrong. Um, so I met with them and asked them if they wanted the jobs, and yeah, they took them. And Lee made some very good signings.
Yep.
Um,
Including Steve Cook as
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Um, and I don't know where it would have gone if we would have got to the playoff finals and won it, but we didn't. But in the 4 years we were there, we had two promotions, one playoff final, and 11th in the league. So we didn't do too bad.
I completely agree. It could have been the other way round though, couldn't it? Because did it go through your thoughts that Fletch could have been the number one, Lee Bradbury as number two? Of course, Fletch is a legend to this very day, isn't he, at the club?
Yeah, of course it
Loved
is.
by
Yeah,
all the fans.
yeah. I mean, I named the stand after him
Yeah.
to his surprise and enjoyment. Um, but I just didn't see Fletch as a manager. Great lad, great for the club. You know, he still talks to me if I text him, and he still calls me chairman. I think he's a lovely lad, but I just didn't. I thought that he's too much of one of the boys to be the manager.
No, fair enough. And I guess, of course, Lee Bradbury, with that military background, had everything more in line, I guess, at that time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was so. I think when I called them both over
Mhm.
on a Sunday afternoon, I think probably Fletch might have thought that he was going to be offered the manager's job.
Yeah.
Um, it did slightly show, but I mean, he accepted the assistance and well. And I think I was behind the goal at Peterborough, and he put in a header, and I was so close to where he was, and he got up high, and he put the ball in the back of the net, and I thought his playing days aren't over yet.
Mm.
I shouldn't, So he soon come away from being the assistant and
Mm.
back playing because he was good player, I think.
And of course, he scored arguably the most important goal ever for the football club. Yeah, that goal against Grimsby.
Yeah,
So yeah, he'll forever be a legend at this football club, Big
yeah,
Fletch, and
and
yeah,
rightly so.
lovely man. But of course, Maxim Denim also got involved at the club during your time. What part did you have to play in getting in him eventually taking over?
Well, I was building a house for him in
Mhm.
Sandbanks, large house which he bought the land off me, um, and I got to know him. I got to know his family. We built him a house in France. We built him a couple of houses in St George's Hill in Surrey. Um, I got closer to him, went on holiday with him a lot, um, and his family, and we spent quite a lot of time together. And one day he just asked me if, he used to come to all the games. He loved football, or he loves football, um, and just asked me if he could get involved. And at the time, I knew Mostyn wanted to sell his shares, so he ended up buying those, and we worked together for a couple of years. And he contributed to helping with the work that we were doing, financially, and obviously put money into the club to buy players.
Are you still friendly with Maxim to this very day?
No, no, I've not spoke to him since he welshed on the deal he did with me, really.
Mm.
So no, I got to know him better towards the end of our relationship. We'd never had a crossword, but I wouldn't. Well, I can't really say any more than that. I think history now speaks for itself. It's the motivation is money.
No, fair enough. Um, as you did mention earlier on, you did like to get involved in visiting the players in the changing room. What sort of stories do you have from those visits, apart from the Notts County one?
Well, I went in probably twice when Eddie was in charge, um, just really to vent my feelings, not anger, but I don't know. You get emotional at times when football it's gets to you, and when you're in a position that you can wander around and do what you want. I suppose a person like me, I did. I went in there a couple of times when Paul Groves and Sean were in charge. Same thing, really. Got so wound up in the situation they were in, but they did a good job. Um, I know the press weren't on their side from day one, and the supporters really weren't either. Um, they were doing a great job with the youth teams, and that's why I thought they were worth trialing, and given a job to. And I think they got the players just turning the corner a little bit in the way that they were starting to play football, but they didn't have the luck that came with, being in charge. And to be in charge, you've got to not just manage people, but you've got to make them know that you care. And I think they were too um, strict, I think, in their ways, too religiously readable into, you know, um, things that the way that they went about their business. But good characters, good football people,
Yeah.
and as I say, I think they got them playing the right way, but just didn't have the luck that went with it.
And there was a story that was brought up in the press against MK Dons. We got beat 1-0 that day. And of course, you visited the changing room. What actually happened?
I was in the box watching the game, and at half time, I was going to go down, and I said to Max, I'm going to pop down and see the players on the way
Hmm.
in the tunnel. And she said, "Oh, can I come?" And she didn't speak that good of English, but I said, "Yeah, okay." And
Hmm.
she came down, greeted them in, and on the way out from the tunnel, which you walk past the changing room, I just shouted out, "Come up, the Cherries," like you do. And
Yeah.
um, she sort of poked her head round the door and said the same sort of thing. Um, and that was it. And we walked back upstairs, and I didn't think any more of it. But after the game, I came down to where the interview was with, I think it was Lee Bradbury, and Neil Perrott was rabbiting on about what was the team talk about by the owner's wife, and I was laid into him anyway because I didn't think it was right what he was saying, and it certainly wasn't a team talk. And then I got phoned on the way home. My wife was driving, and she got out of the car. My phone rang, and it was Radio 5 Live. And the commentators started taking a mickey out of the club by saying, women doing team talks and all this, which is a load of rubbish. So I told him, and obviously cut me off the air because I told him in a way that it's natural to me. And I ended up getting fined for it by the FA. But I apologise to any youngsters that were listening.
No, that's fair enough. Of course, after the tough start to the season, which followed that Huddersfield defeat, you made the change and went with Paul Groves and of course Sean. And was that your call at the time to actually let Lee and Fletch step down and Paul Groves and Sean to take over?
Not particularly all mine. I mean, Max was very anxious to move Lee to one side, and I think Fletch had moved back into playing then, and there was somebody else. And Max would phone me up after a game, and he'd be talking to me on the phone from I don't know, Carlisle. We got to about Birmingham before he put the phone down, which was just not good for me. And so I mentioned Paul and Sean, who he had met, and he said, "Yeah, let's give them a go." I mentioned it because they were doing so really well with the youth team, and I'd known Sean from Dorchester, and I knew if you cut him in half, he'd just have football written across him, and same with Paul Groves. So I just thought they might be the right people. And as I say, I think they got the players turning the corner a bit in the way that they were playing and approaching the games. They were playing possession football a bit better. But things like we went to play Swindon, and Canio kept coming on the pitch, and they weren't in the right way managing material, I don't think. I mean, if it were me, I would have got my players off the pitch because they were playing against 12 people. Canio was on the pitch most of the game. He didn't stay in his box at all, and things like that I would have done. And I think the supporters saw the weakness there, and I don't know, the press as well just rubbished them, and I felt sorry for them really because Paul had moved down to the area. When I moved Sean and Paul on, I mean, there was lots of talk about other people joining the club as manager. Mostyn wanted Steve Cottrell to join, and out of politeness, I went and gave him an interview, but he certainly wasn't for me. And we had an approach from Hoddle and his agent and various people that are quite well known. And in the end, I had a phone call from Eddie's agent, and I took it, and he asked me if I was interested in Eddie coming back, and I said possibly, yeah. And he told me what he wanted, but I don't know whether this was the truth or not, but I said no way, we're not paying that. And then about a week later I had a phone call from Johnny Yems.
Oh yeah.
And said, "Oh, are you interested in Eddie and Jason coming back?" And I said, "Yeah, but not what they want." He said, "Oh no, I can get them for the right package, and I'd come with them." And I'd known Johnny for several months, and he helped me help get players in and what have you. And I really did get on well with him. So we agreed terms with Eddie, and through John, and we agreed terms with Jason, although Jason's terms were sort of changing every day. And then I chatted with Burnley, and after a lot of toing and throwing over the period of about 3 weeks, we come to a decision with them, and we signed them, and rest is history. They came back to the club and turned it around.
When you did eventually leave the club, what was that day like for you? Was it a sense of relief, or was it a case that you would have loved to have continued?
Well, it's hard to say. I left the club because I'd put everything I had into it, energy-wise. My business, which, as I say, had approaching a £30 million turnover, gone down to next to nothing. So all my energy was into the club, and I didn't have the money that Max had, and money talks, and people were siding with Max more so than me, and I was losing my authority because of that. Um, and it became like bees around a honeypot. And I felt, well, I'd done what I planned to do. I always had it in my mind that I'd like to see the club in a better position than when Harry was there. He got to sixth in the championship, and I think we were sixth at the time when I left. And I thought, well, that might be the omen for me. I couldn't really work like I was because the authority had gone, and I had people that I'd brought to the club then siding with Max, and it became two sides really. And because of his wealth, he won everybody over. So I decided it was time to leave. So I mentioned, go on.
What was your relationship like with Jeff Mostyn in particular, during the time at the club?
Didn't have one. I tolerated him.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I tolerated him. What you see is not what you get, I'm afraid.
And with the regards to the fans, Eddie, of course, sometimes there was that strained relationship. Do you feel that the fans couldn't see at the time the passion that you had for the football club, and what it meant to you?
Well, I think lots of the fans did. There was, when I went there was a loud minority and a silent majority, and I really had to take on the loud minority, and I think I won a lot of them round, and they understood that I was one of them. I was a fan, really. I didn't, I always wanted to do things for the fans. I loved it when I'd come back after close season and I'd built something or done something, and people would say, "Cool, this is looking good now, Eddie," and and it just pushed me on. I'd read all the slips on the wall around the North Stand and East Stand, and I knew that the club meant to a lot of people. They were emotionally in love with the club, and I respected that, and I was in the same situation. There was me come from a very poor background, so to speak, and ending up walking out onto the pitch when there was nobody there and looking at the stadium and thinking, Christ, I'm running this club now, and I felt so proud. It bring tears to my eyes on a Sunday morning at times. You just like I say, it's very spiritual, whatever the word is again. You just get it under your skin, and it's hard to get it off. But what disappoints me more than anything since I left is, there's probably been £500 million plus gone into the club from their promotion, and they still don't own a stadium. They still don't have a proper training ground, although I still consider the one that I built adequate. you know, it certainly, and it's just lined a lot of people's pockets at the top. And I just don't think it's right for the fans. And I hope I have to eat my words, but I just hope that the stadium they don't fall foul of anything disastrous by not having their own stadium. They say they're looking for a new ground and anything else, but I designed a new stadium to go on the ground that they've got there now, and I put it online, and I was told to take it down. It's a 22,000 seater, and it could be built in 4 seasons, one end at each season.
Mhm.
Um, and you could do it, for probably a year's money from the Premiership. So a little bit of saving and a little bit of less spending on themselves, there would be money to do that. But at the moment, I just think it's all about going. It's gone back to where it was before, and people just taking money out of the club and not investing it in the club. I mean, I can't knock the players that they've bought in, and it's got them back to the Premiership. Can't knock the manager they bought in, but I can knock the big spenders outside of that.
Of course, with regards to Dean Court, there's always this theory that we can only extend it up to 15,000 by filling in the corners. But you thought you could build, you know, on the current ground, get it up to 22,
Yeah,
rather
I've
than
got the
building a new Superdome somewhere.
I've got the plans. I've
Mhm.
put them online. It's extending it out slightly on the west stand, but other than that, it's quite a modest but nice 22,000 seater stadium. And I think with standing maybe coming back in, you'd get more than that in it, and you still got the parking and so on. I would, if I can't say if, but that's what I'd like to see. That's where I'd like to see the money being spent, not on. I mean, I remember in 2017, I think reading that they'd have a new ground in 5 years or 4 years or whatever. It's just a load of rubbish. They ain't got anybody there with the balls to get up and do it, I don't think.
See, that's what I've always wanted is you look at Southampton, for example, you look at Reading, you look at teams like that, where they build these stadiums on the outskirts, but they don't have the feel of the old ground.
No.
And, that's what Dean Court is to us.
Yeah,
It
it's the
is,
home, isn't
that's,
it?
it's an
Yeah, I
asset.
mean, yeah, I buried a time capsule there after 100 years had gone. Um, and I just it's spiritual, and there's no need to move. And I know the landlords from my dealings with them, and I know they're reasonable people, and they would sell at a reasonable price. So they wouldn't give it away. It wouldn't be cheap, but it wouldn't be, they wouldn't take the piss. And it just needs proper negotiations, and it just needs somebody to get on and do it. But I think they just want to share the money out.
Bringing it back to Eddie Howe, and of course he left the club for a second time after our relegation from the Premier League and that win against Everton. And looking at those pictures from that day, he looked like a bit of a heartbroken man. That I think some players let him down. Was you disappointed he went at that point? And are you so surprised he's doing so well at Newcastle?
I wasn't surprised he went at that point because I just feel that the same thing was happening around him as it did around me. I think Max Denham is very much his own man and supplying the money. He can tell people what to do, and I think he influenced the decision to let Eddie go. And I certainly wouldn't have done it at the time. I knew he's, capable of doing what the new boy's done, getting them back up there. But Um, Nevertheless, he went and he's gone to Newcastle. He's done well there, and he'll do well in football whilst he's got the energy and the desire that he's got and that he had when he was at Bournemouth. He's bound to do well.
And he's always educating himself. That's what I watched an interview with him from a couple of months back, and he's always educating himself. And he was doing that whilst he was at Bournemouth as well, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's not just educate yourself. It's working hard at what you do, and I believe that's what he does. He works hard, and he gets the best out of the players, gets the best out of the team, and he's made a lot of people a lot of money.
Yeah, definitely. And like I say, and I agree with you. I think he will be England manager at one point. And
Yeah. I'll put money. Well, I might even put some money on it.
yeah, and it'd be
And
lovely to see, an England manager and maybe even World Cup winner, who started out at AFC Bournemouth.
yeah, it's yeah. There's a few people that have been at the club that have really shone. Him being one of them, and yeah, it's been a pleasure for me anyway to have had the time I spent with them and some of the lovely supporters that I just want to say there was one little old guy there that used to come in Sunday mornings, didn't get paid for it. He'd come in voluntary, and I'd go in every Sunday morning, and he'd be there sort of 7 o'clock, sweeping up all the dog ends and everything from outside the front door, so that it was nice for Monday morning. And I got to a stage where I used to get in there at 7 o'clock with him and help him sweep them up because he was really old, and I felt for him. And he used to bring me a box of a packet of chocolate eclairs before every game. His name was Lynn.
Mhm.
Um, and when we were hard up, and after a fans forum, he came up and said, "Look, I haven't got much money, but I've got £1,000 saved. You can have it towards the club."
Mhm.
And I said, "No, no, we don't want that." And there was Steve and Tracy. Steve was one of the security people there, and Tracy was, Bournemouth through and through. And there was just lots of lovely people like that. Neil Vacher, the club secretary, lovely man.
Mhm.
So I met wonderful people when I was there, and I enjoyed, and I was proud to be part of the success it was for those 4 years.
There's
Privilege.
nothing you would do differently.
No, not a thing. Not a thing.
Good stuff. There has been mention of you looking to get back into football, and I know that you were looking at Poole Town and also Hamworthy. Is that still on the agenda, do you think?
I'd love to get back into football, but I wouldn't want to travel. So the club would have to be local, and I don't see me ever getting involved with Bournemouth again. So Paul Town was um, an easy bet, and I bought an option to have majority shares there, but I didn't follow it through because there's no prospect of a ground at the moment. And their lease, I think they've got 3 years left and on a rolling lease with the school. Um, and I know Chris, Reeves is Paul Town through and through, and I've worked with him since I left Bournemouth and still do. I did some work for him not so long ago for Paul Town by way of drawings and presentations, and he's a lovely bloke. And I wish one day that I would could get involved and get them a stadium. That would be my only involvement, is finding them a home. I mean, although Bournemouth was my club as a youngster, the first football game I actually watched was at Poole Town with my older brother
Mhm.
as a youngster, and I used to go there every Saturday as a sort of 6-year-old. And so I've got an affection for Poole as well. And yeah, I'd love to get involved at some stage.
And they are a good club, and hopefully one day, in the not so distant future, could they reach the football league? Do you feel, if the ground was sorted?
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
Definitely. Yeah, it's got ambitions, but they just need some luck on finding a ground. And I've got plans done to present to the council, which I might be putting in shortly, to try and persuade the council to release some land for them. That's another story, and you know, could be or couldn't be. But I've got plenty of energy and plenty of desire to carry on.
Well, hopefully, fingers crossed, that will come to fruition, because it would be great to see Poole Town being successful. Had a good couple of years, a few years back, didn't they?
Yeah,
Where they
yeah,
got into the National League South and looked like they were going to push to get promotion from there, but unfortunately, the ground held them back.
yeah.
So,
It did. It did. Unfortunately, it's just one of those things. It's they really lost their ground when the speedway got involved, and
mhm.
there you go.
Um, Final question, Eddie. What are you up to now? I know that you're involved with FTY, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm a majority shareholder in it, and I've got a lot of young lads working for me. We also have got a company called ESA, which builds football products,
Mhm.
state of the art ones, and we're selling them all around the world at the moment, and it's doing really well. Um, and if anybody's interested in having a look, just Google eliteskillsarena.com,
Yeah.
and you'll see we've sold machines to Barcelona, Southampton, Liverpool, um, and various other clubs, and they're used thousands of times a day. So, I mean, I get the usage through every day, and it's always above 2,000. So we've got probably 500 machines now around the world, um, and it's growing. So, yeah, it's looking good.
And of course, the complex is up at Branksome, isn't it? And it's very impressive when I've been in there.
You have? Oh, well,
Yeah,
great.
yeah, I've been in there. Yeah, I've been in there already.
Yeah,
So,
it's love to see the kids. It's lovely to see the smile on the kids' faces when they come. It's like them going into a sweet shop, and they just love coming here and kicking the ball, and it's good for them, and you know it's good for everybody.
yeah, my
Yeah,
daughter went in there and she was kicking the ball about, and she loved it. So, Operation Bronze, I call it. So, you never know.
yeah,
Never
yeah.
know.
Well, you want to get in there yourself and have a kick about, see how
Well,
strenuous it can be.
well, yeah. I think it might be a little bit too late for me. I don't think I'll be getting the call from Scott Parker and saying, "Yeah, do you fancy a position up
Exactly.
front?" Yeah, I think I'll leave that to Dom Solanke, and
Yeah,
yeah, I might
yeah.
hopefully one day play a charity match with Steve Fletcher, but
Who
we shall
knows?
see. Yeah, we
Yeah,
shall see. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on the
that's
show, Eddie. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for everything you've done for the club. Because,
that's all
like,
right. I wish the team and the supporters all the best for the season, for sure.
thank you so much. And like I say, you don't get the credit that you deserve at this club, and what you did was put us on such a good financial footing, and that's why we are where we are now. If you hadn't done that, who knows where the club could have
Mm.
been.
Well, all I did is have some fun. So, thanks for inviting me on the show.
No problem at all, Eddie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for joining me on this special show. Please do remember to hit the like, the subscribe, and the bell button below to be alerted to any new videos we do here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Please also do check out our interviews with Harry Redknapp, Sean Teal. We've had Paul Mitchell, we've had Vince Bartram, and many, many more. So please do check those out. Do also check out our recent interviews as well with AFCB. Of course, Arsenal Fan TV. So do check that out. Until the next video, up the cherries, and I'll see you in the next one.